You are listening to 31 Pearls. Please remember to subscribe.
The Book of Gleanings, Chapter 6. The Companionship of Yadol. Concerning our father Hermanatar, these things were written in the scroll of Pachhaman, scribe of the Firehawks. Generation had grown out of generation, and the Lord of light and life had hidden himself, for he knew the nature of man, and none could find him. Time passed, and they sought him no more. Then, high-riding, ass-born, came one who was to reveal the light to men. Praises to the Lord of light and life for Hermanatar the light-bringer. He wandered the hillsides among shepherds who tended their flocks with care, and he learned their ways. This was the wisest of men, and his body was filled to overflowing with manly powers. Wide-striding he measured the mountains' broad pastures. In anger his face burned like the sun at noontide, while in benevolence it shed the calm glow of the moon in the night quietness. In courage and skill none could match him. He was a child like no other. Before others crawled he stood upright. He learned his letters at 3 years. He could read and write at 5. He taught those who attended the temple with him when he was 7. He was 10 when his foster father joined his father's, and the estate was divided through the women. At 12 he changed the course of the river falling down from the mountains to lead it through new pastures, and thus his mother became rich. At 13 he was sent to the shepherd of the city and trained with spear and shield. At 17 he slew the king's right-hand man and fled to the mountains of Akama. Like a beast of prey he wandered at will. He was the mountain dweller, firm of limb and swift-footed, taking according to his whim from those who passed his way. Mighty was his bow of anshan wood. Sinew-strung, it sped swiftly, his straight-shot arrows. High on the mountains wandered another, Yadol his name, one who lived on herbs and wild honey. Tall and long-haired, for no knife had ever touched it. His hand tamed a wild wolf cub, and it was his companion. Wherever he went, it followed. The wild beasts did not molest him, and he walked freely among them. Hermanatar was a trapper of wild beasts, and he dug a pit at the place where they came down to water, and other traps were set. Yadol passed that way, and the pit was filled in, and the traps broken. The ensnared deer was set free. When Hermanatar returned and found the pit filled in, and the traps broken, his heart was seized by a whirlwind. He raged against the skies, he swore against the trees. He sought for days, he sought, but could not come upon Yadol, the evasive one, the cunning one. His traps were useless, his pits a vain labor. He hungered, and because he hungered, became less cautious. When he lay in wait among the bushes to waylay men who passed, he was not held back by thought of their number, but loosed his arrows and leapt upon them. Hermanatar attacked stormy-hearted, like a whirlwind he attacked. But when they saw he was one alone, they stood fast. Hermanatar turned back into the bushes, but arrows sent after him found their mark. For 3 days he lay in his place upon the mountain, and his legs swelled up, and he thirsted, for he could not get water. He lay in a body of pain, and his spirit prepared to depart from him. A wolf came, and his hand sought a stone, but weakness held his arm, so it could not be cast. Then lo, the wolf licked his hand, and departed. Then Yadol came. In his hand was a skin filled with fresh water, and he knelt beside Hermanatar and gave him a drink. Yadol dressed the wounds and brought herbs to eat, and so it came to pass that Hermanatar grew strong again. Thereafter Hermanatar and Yadol dwelt together within a cave among the mountains. But Yadol would neither slay for meat nor eat of it. Yet they roamed the wild mountains together in joyous companionship, and their days sped swiftly by. But Hermanatar longed for other things, and therefore was tempted to attack men who passed, for he desired fine meats and garments and ornaments for his body. These things were brought to the ears of the king, and those about the king said, "Let us take men and go up into the mountain and slay this wild hill wanderer, this manslayer and robber." But the king bade them hold their hands, for he desired to see the man for himself. He wanted him taken alive, and he said, "Should any man slay him, that man is mine." The king therefore took counsel of the wise men, saying, "How shall we take this man, if man he be, and not a spirit of the mountains? I would look upon him with my own eyes, for I know of none such as he. One such there once was, but he is no more." Then one among the wise men said, "This man of the mountains, if man he be, will follow the ways of men. Therefore let us procure a harlot from the temple, a woman of pleasure, and let her go and take him, ensnare the hunter in the well-baited trap." The king said, "This is no new thing, and perchance it can bring the wild man of the mountains down to me in chains of silk, even into the city. Therefore go and put your words into deeds." Then a man was sent to the temple, and he brought back Hiserta, a woman of pleasure, in exchange for gold, and she was taken to the hunters who knew the ways of the mountains. They set off, journeying for some days, the hunters and the harlot and those with her, until they came to a place where there was a water-hole, close by the way of Elamkai. They passed beyond the water-hole to the spring above, sending men into the surrounding forest. The day came when one returned, saying, "The wild man comes." Then the chief of the hunters said to the woman, "O woman, bare your breasts, and sit beside the waters. Use the wiles of your calling. Have no shame, but welcome him boldly. When he comes up close, reveal your secrets, drawing him near to you. Teach him the art of the harlot that ensnares men." The woman was not loath to take him, responding well to the task, sitting by the waters, singing. However, Hermanatar circled warily about the place, but discovered nothing, and no harm came to him. He drew closer, and when he did, the harlot revealed her secret charms, and was well pleased by the eagerness he displayed. She instructed him in the harlot's art, and they dallied there for several days. But the hunters did not come to take him, for they found no way to come upon him furtively. Then after 7 days Hermanatar departed, passing up the incline of the mountainside without looking back. The harlot was afraid because the hunters murmured against her. But it was not her fault, and the chief of hunters said, "Wait and see. Let us abide a while yet." Hermanatar returned to the place where the wild deer grazed, but Yadol was not there, and when he crossed the wind of the deer, they fled away. He went to the cave where they shared their rest, but Yadol was not there. The wolf alone lay close by, and Hermanatar called out to it. But the wolf stayed afar off. It would not come near because Hermanatar was not purified from contact with the harlot. For a day and a night Hermanatar stalked the mountainside, wide-striding along its paths, but he did not find Yadol. Therefore he returned to the place where he had left the woman. She greeted him warmly, making him welcome with cooked meats, rejoicing in her heart. They remained there for 3 days, and she tamed him to the need for a woman. Then the day came when she said, "You are wise. You are strong even as a bull. Why run wild upon the mountainsides with one who deserts you at will? Come with me unto the king, for he has heard tales of your might and would close his eyes to your deeds. He will give you a house and gold, and I, Hiserta, will become your servant. The temple of love will be opened for you, and I will show you the delights within. Come and dwell under the shadow of the king, for he is mighty. He is the wild bull which roars over men. Hermanatar thought and said, No, I will not go before the king, for he does no good in my sight. Do not the people murmur against him, saying, Woe for these days! The hand of the king rests heavily upon us. His pride knows no bounds, and no maiden is left virgin for her husband. Neither the daughter of a man of blood, nor the wife of a prince, walks freely in the city. Are not all its doors shut like the doors of prisons? The woman thought a while, then said, Who tells these things of the king? Are their words established? He is the great king, a mountain licked by 10,000 tongues, the king whose whisper fills the judgment hall, whose voice echoes 1,000 leagues away. He is the glorious king, a man perfect in strength and proportion. His body is one to delight the eyes of any woman. None other has his wisdom and knowledge, therefore men talk against him. For it is the nature of men to be jealous of those who so much excel them. Let us go. Let the king see you face to face and rejoice, for you are alike. O come with me to where each day brings new delights, where the young women are gaily robed, and the young men wonderful to look upon. Come to where breezes are filled with sweet smells, where beds are soft and rooms perfumed. Come to the place where life is enjoyed. Come serve the king. As you are now, so was he in his youth, but youth departs, albeit slowly. He is the never-resting one, the son of the Lady of Battles. Come and do not fear, all will be made ready for you. Even now the wise men tell of your coming, and men wait to escort you in peace. Hermanatar was swayed by her words, and said, So let it be. Where you go, there go I. Then Hiserta gave him a necklace she had brought, and led him to the tents of the hunters. But when they saw him face to face, they were afraid. Such was the light held in the eyes of the stalwart, wide-striding one. Yet they recognized him as a man like themselves, and their fear passed. So it was that Hermanatar went with them, and with the woman, and came to the city and went before the king, and the king looked upon him with favor. He gave Hermanatar wine, and he was drunk, and oil for his body, and he was anointed. He was arrayed in 3 robes. He became a man of rank. He was given a house and servants. He was given a watchman. He became captain of the guards, and none was like him. To the woman of pleasure, the harlot, the king gave bracelets of gold and sent her away, saying, Go to your proper place, for you have completed the things required of you. There you will be great among women, while here you will be degraded among them. Hiserta departed in sorrow, for even a harlot can feel faint stirrings of affection through the oft-soiled winding cloth which enwraps her sordid spirit. Hermanatar learned the ways of the palace and walked as he willed, but soon he became restless, for his thoughts turned towards Hiserta. He missed her ways. Yet many women cast their glances towards him, but behind these was the threat of the sword. He was not a man of smooth and subtle ways, being unskilled in the deceit which flourishes under the shadow of kings. Though favored by the king and safe under his mantle, he was a man alone in the palace and courtyards. He set out to find Hiserta, seeking her at the temple of pleasure within the temple gate, where she had served as a harlot. But the priest said, The woman is no longer here, for a harlot given gold thinks herself a queen, and the women have driven her out. Hermanatar sought her throughout the city, but she was nowhere to be found. Persisting, he eventually found her at a harlot's post beside the river, among wineskins and men of the waters. There was one who sat with her, and he was a man of blood, therefore armed. So when Hermanatar came up to them seeking to talk with the woman, he drew his sword. When the man of blood saw that Hermanatar was undismayed by this, and prepared to settle the issue, he mocked him, saying, "Why should men fight when women are plentiful, and we have a half measure of corn?" Hermanatar brought the woman from those who grow rich on the defiled bodies of women, and established her in his house. The men about the king murmured against him, speaking poisoned words in the ear of the king. The women of the palace also turned from him. Meeting Hiserta on the street, they caught her and tore her veil off her face, while men of subtle ways who served the king mocked behind their hands. The men of blood serving the king set their faces against Hermanatar, while in the city men said as he passed, "There goes the great one who bathes in dirty water." Therefore Hermanatar departed from the city, going to dwell without its walls, among men who tilled the soil. It was not long before the day came when the woman saw that Hermanatar was downcast, and so she said to him, "O man of might, when my eyes rest upon you, I am raised above all women, and now my heart is cleansed of all that polluted it. My body rejoices in freedom, and my life is a song of gladness. Yet I am saddened because my heart tells me that you are sorrowful and not at ease within yourself, that half your heart remains in the mountains. Therefore, hear what I say. Go there once more while I remain here to await your return. Perhaps this time you will find Yadol." Her words made Hermanatar sad, and he said, "How can I go away and leave you here? Who will protect you? What man can I place over you who will not know you? Yet go to the mountain I must, therefore you shall come with me." They departed, crossing by the way of Hamramah, and came to the mountains, high-standing and steep-sided. They searched many days, but Yadol could not be found, neither would any bird or beast approach them. They wandered the mountains, they searched the valleys, and they grew weary in the search. They returned to the foot of the mountains, below the place where shepherds dwelt, and into the tillage, where there was a city. It was the time of Akitoa, and Sherah, chief of the city dwellers, was to be married. Being invited to remain in the city as a guest, they stayed there. When the days of feasting commenced, men came from the mountains and tillage, and there was much dancing and singing. Hermanatar and Hiserta were made welcome, taking their places among the guests and storytellers, eating and drinking their fill. There was strong drink brewed from corn and wine from the palm, and Hermanatar became overfilled with these, and, drunk, he fell asleep. While he slept, a man came upon Hiserta and seized her, saying, "Come, let us be together, so I may have pleasure and you may have silver. I know you are a woman of many pleasures, a servant to the vices of men." When she denied him his desire, he sought to take her by force, but she drew a knife and slew him, for a woman cannot be taken by a man, except she surrender herself to his needs. Hearing the clamor, men came, and seeing what had happened, they seized the woman. Others took Hermanatar, and both were brought before the headman, who delivered them to a place of confinement. When the feasting was over, they were brought before Potosi, one who sat in judgment. Potosi said to Hermanatar, "You have come among us as a guest and a man of good standing. Therefore we know not whether you have been wronged, or whether a man of this city has been slain unjustly. If you have been wronged, then also establish the standing of this woman. It is said that she is a harlot without standing. This being so, then you shall pay the price of he who is slain to his kindred, and no more will be required of you." Hermanatar answered Potosi thus, "You are one filled with the essence of wisdom, who justly occupies the seat of judgment. I ask with due humility that you give ear to my plea for this woman who may not speak for herself. Denounce her I cannot. Instead, I will claim her as wife under the law of the Hudasham, for she has dwelt with me for 20 months, and in that time has not known another man. nor have I cause for complaint." Hearing this, and because Hermanatar made claim to the law of Hudasham, Petosi sent for Enillerich, priest of the great temple, that he should say whether or not Hiserta stood before him as the wife of Hermanatar. When the priest came, he inquired of the woman whether she were a virgin when Hermanatar took her. Had she said yes, then the passage of 3 months would have given her the standing of a wife, but she answered no. The priest asked her if she were a widow when Hermanatar took her. Had she answered yes, then the passage of 20 months would have given her the standing of a wife, but she answered no. Then the priest asked if she were a harlot when Hermanatar took her, and she answered yes. Therefore, as 7 years had not yet passed since Hermanatar first took her, she could not have the standing of a wife, nor could she claim to be a harlot of the temple, for she had left its protection. Now the mark of a harlot was upon her, and Hermanatar had forfeited his standing in the place of judgment. So Petosi gave judgment upon them, and it was decreed that when Gala came, they would be led to the enclosure of death, and there tied back to back. The woman would be strangled with cords, after the manner of harlots, while Hermanatar would be left to carry her as a burden within the enclosure for 7 days. Then, if the gods willed, all he might take with him, being 3 handfuls of corn and a gourd of water. The judgment was fulfilled. Hermanatar lived. He departed and went his way, and the kindred of the slain men failed to catch him. Hermanatar passed across the land, coming at last to the temple of the 7 illuminated ones, and his mother was there. She dwelt there alone with only an old serving woman, for now the temple was desolate and without walls. For 2 years Hermanatar dwelt with his mother, but then his heart went out again to the companion he had left upon the mountainside. He said to his mother, "I must depart, for my heart cries out for one who saved my life and whose ways are mine. Great is the love of man for woman, but greater is the love of man for man." So Hermanatar came again to the mountains, and lo, he had entered the forest but half a day, when he came upon Yadol. How warm was the greeting, how strong the embrace! Hermanatar said, "Long have I sought you, and found you not. Yet I come again, and you are here." Yadol answered, "It was because of the harlot. I was here, but you saw me not, nor could I make myself known to you." Hermanatar returned with Yadol to the place where his mother dwelt, and they remained there, none knowing what they were, for they were garbed as priests. They tilled the ground about the place, enjoying its fruitfulness, and both were nourished by the wisdom of Hermanatar's mother. Nintursu was the last of the line of Sesuda. 10,000 generations had passed since the beginning, and 1,000 generations since the recreation. The children of God and the children of men had passed into dust, and only men remained. 100 generations had passed since the overwhelming deluge, and 10 generations since the destroyer last appeared. Once man lived for less than 80 years. Now his years were 70. Once God had walked with men, and men knew only God. Now he was hidden behind many veils, and few saw him, and then but dimly and with great distortion. Where once there was one God, now gods were as numbered as the stars. Yet the great key remained in the midst of men, and it was here, at the temple of the 7 illuminated ones. The key of life, the key which was given into the keeping of our father, Hermanatar. It is a secret thing, something exceedingly great. It is not lost, but has come down to us and is known in our times. Now one day, as Hermanatar sat beneath a tree, Enjoying its shade at the height of noon, he saw a stranger approaching. The man was weary and staggered, so Hermanatar sent his servant to bring him into the shade. The servant hastened out and brought him in. He was given refreshment, and his feet washed. And when this had been done, Hermanatar asked him where he was bound, and the stranger replied, "I go to Tegel, for in that place is a mighty man, and a just one who will give ear to my plea. For untoward things are happening in the great city, things which should not be. The people cry out in the place of assembly, but they cry to the wind. Gilnamner has seized the heart of the king, and now rules. In 12 days I am pledged to marry, but there is no lightness of a bridegroom in my heart, for the king elects to be first with the bride. This is the custom come down to us from the gods of old, but my heart is wrung like a grape. I cannot find it within me to give her into his keeping on the wedding night. Therefore I go to find one who can challenge him at the door of the bridal chamber, as the custom permits, for this is no low-born woman. But this is a thing none has heard of as having been done before in our times, for men fear the gods. I know of none other who may stand before the king as one sanctified." Hermanatar heard him and replied, "Be of good heart and go no further, for I am that man." Hearing this, the stranger, filled with gratitude, fell upon his knees before Hermanatar and said, "How can I thank you? How can I repay you? What can I give?" But Hermanatar answered, "When a man does what has to be done, then payment and reward sully the deed." Then he called to Yadol and said, "Prepare, for we go into the city of the king." And because he was sanctified, Hermanatar claimed the protection of Eriker. Then they offered prayers in the antechamber between heaven and earth. They dwelt with the brother of the bridegroom until the day of the wedding feast came, for the bridegroom was not of this city. When the feast was over, and before the guests departed, the bridal chamber was made ready with the bride within, and the young messenger of the temple went about making his call. Then the king came to the antechamber, passing by the husband, who was to wait without. But there, standing before the door, was Hermanatar, his right hand on the pillar, for none might otherwise challenge the king, and in his left hand were the reeds. Those who were gathered there, the men and the women, drew back, and men of the king's guard came forward, each claiming the right to enter the combat on behalf of the king, for one man could precede the king, but no more. Such was the custom. The choice of whom to fight from among those who came forward lay with Hermanatar. And because he chose the captain of the guard, a man skilled in war, the people were amazed. But Hermanatar knew the man's weakness. No more than 5 blows were struck, when Hermanatar, leaping to the left-hand side of the captain of the guard, drove up under his armpit, so that he fell to the ground and died. Then Hermanatar and the king girded themselves and fought in the high courtyard, and it was a fight such as men had not seen before, the young and the old, agility against experience, stamina against cunning. They were both equal in the fight. They slashed at each other until their weapons broke and their shields split. They grappled, they stamped, they rolled in the dust. They lashed out at each other, and the combat went on until the water ran out, and still they both stood. Then they could not fight with weapons, but stood disarmed, and this time neither might cause the death of the other. They circled each other warily, keeping away from the balustrade. Then Hermanatar jumped aside, and with a swift movement caught the king to him. Twisting him so, they both fell down into the courtyard below the ground, and the king fell over his shoulder, so that his breastbone broke, and he remained on the ground. Then the king's guard gathered about him, and a man skilled with medicines came forward. Though grievously hurt, the king would not die. Hermanator gave his seal and right to the husband, and with Yadol parted the men who stood about in silence, for they could not harm them. So Hermanator and Yadol departed from the land, for it became closed to them, and, mounted on mountain asses, they set out on the way of Anhu. Hermanator crossed the wide plains with Yadol until they came safely to the stream of bitter waters, brought there by Maminatim. And so they came up to Machur, close by the forest of cedars, and dwelt there. This is the place where there was a temple to Humbinwera the guardian,